Imagine a war that breaks out in the Pacific, with China at the forefront, and the world is caught off guard. Within 72 hours, the fate of global security hangs in the balance. Let's explore the scenario that could change everything. The current tensions between the US and China are reaching a boiling point. The ongoing trade war, which has seen tariffs imposed on billions of dollars worth of goods, has created a toxic atmosphere that's far from resolved. The South China Sea disputes, where China's aggressive expansion has clashed with the maritime claims of its neighbors, have yet to be fully addressed. And the Taiwan question, which has the potential to spark a wider conflict, remains a ticking time bomb. But it's not just these issues that make the situation so volatile. China's rapid military modernization has created a power dynamic in the Pacific that's hard to ignore. Its nuclear capabilities, which have grown significantly in recent years, pose a significant threat to regional and global stability. And its cyber warfare assets, which have been used to disrupt the operations of rivals and adversaries, make it a formidable opponent in the information age. A hypothetical war scenario between the US and China in the Pacific would have far-reaching consequences for global trade, economics, and politics. The immediate impact would be felt in the region, where the loss of trade and commerce would have devastating effects on economies that are already fragile. The global supply chain, which relies heavily on the Pacific trade route, would also be severely disrupted, leading to shortages and price increases. But the consequences wouldn't stop there. A war in the Pacific would also have major implications for the global economy, which is still recovering from the effects of the pandemic. The loss of trade and commerce would lead to a significant decline in economic growth, potentially triggering a recession. And the increase in oil prices, which would follow a disruption to the global supply chain, would make it even harder for countries to recover. As we delve into the world of high-stakes diplomacy and military brinkmanship, we'll uncover the complex web of alliances and rivalries that could lead to a Pacific war. We'll explore the role of key players, such as Japan and South Korea, which have their own security concerns and strategic interests. And we'll examine the potential flashpoints that could spark a conflict, from the disputed islands of the South China Sea to the strategic waterways of the Taiwan Strait. But before we get to the intricacies of the Pacific security landscape, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Why is this scenario so relevant today? What are the underlying factors that make a Pacific war a possibility, and what are the implications for the world if it were to happen? To answer these questions, we need to go back to the early 2000s, when China began its rapid military modernization. At that time, the country's military spending was increasing by 10 annually, and its defense budget was growing faster than its economy. But it wasn't just the size of the budget that was concerning, it was the nature of the spending, too. China's military modernization was focused on creating a force that could project power beyond its borders, into the Pacific and beyond. The country invested heavily in new technologies, such as stealth fighters and ballistic missiles, and it developed a range of capabilities that would allow it to dominate the region. Fast forward to today, and the situation is even more complex. China's military spending has continued to grow, and its defense budget has reached unprecedented levels. The country has also developed a range of new capabilities, from cyber warfare to anti-satellite missiles, that give it a significant advantage in the Pacific. But it's not just China that's driving the tensions in the Pacific. The US, too, has been increasing its military presence in the region, with a focus on countering China's growing power. The country has also been building new alliances, such as the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue with Australia, Japan, and India, which has been seen as a challenge to China's regional influence. As we explore the complex web of alliances and rivalries that could lead to a Pacific war, we'll examine the role of these key players and the potential flashpoints that could spark a conflict. We'll also look at the implications for the world if a war were to happen, and what it would mean for global security, trade, and economics. The stakes are high, and the consequences of a Pacific war would be far-reaching. But by understanding the underlying factors that drive this scenario, we can gain a deeper insight into the complex world of high-stakes diplomacy and military brinkmanship. So let's dive in and explore the world of the Pacific Storm, where the fate of global security hangs in the balance. In the first 72 hours of a war between the US and China, the stakes are incredibly high. A surprise Chinese attack on a US naval base in the Pacific could be the catalyst that sets off a chain reaction of military and economic responses, drawing in multiple nations and forever altering the global security landscape. Imagine the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, a formidable force of F-18 fighter jets, guided missile destroyers, and submarines, suddenly facing a barrage of Chinese missiles and fighter jets. The initial response would be crucial in determining the course of the war, with options ranging from a limited strike to a full-scale invasion of China. The US military's Joint Chiefs of Staff, led by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, would convene an emergency meeting to assess the situation and develop a strategy. They would consider factors such as the location and size of the attack, the number of casualties, and the potential impact on regional stability. The meeting would be a high-stakes game of diplomatic and military poker, with the fate of thousands of lives hanging in the balance. As the news of the attack spreads, the global reaction would be swift and decisive. The US would likely call an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council to condemn the attack and rally international support. The European Union, Japan, and other key allies would issue statements of solidarity with the US, while also calling for restraint and diplomacy. But as the world watches the drama unfold, there's another question that lingers. What about the other players in the region? Japan, for example, has a long and complex relationship with China, marked by both economic ties and territorial disputes. Would Tokyo align itself with the US, or try to navigate a delicate balance between the two superpowers? South Korea, meanwhile, is caught in the middle, with its own tensions with North Korea adding to the complexity. India, with its growing economic and military influence, would also be watching the situation closely, wondering whether to insert itself into the fray. The Pacific, it seems, is about to become the epicenter of a global storm. The US and China are locked in a high-stakes game of military and economic one-upmanship, with the world holding its breath as the first 72 hours tick away. But what if the US and China are not the only players in this high-stakes game? How will other nations, including Japan, South Korea, and India, navigate the treacherous waters of a Pacific war? As the situation unfolds, the world will be watching with bated breath, wondering which way the tide will turn. Will the US and China find a way to de-escalate the conflict, or will the situation spiral out of control? The clock is ticking, and the world is waiting with anticipation. As we delve deeper into the scenario of a war between the US and China in the Pacific, it becomes increasingly clear that the consequences would be nothing short of catastrophic. The devastating impact on the global economy would be felt almost immediately, with a potential collapse of international trade and a significant increase in poverty and unemployment. The flow of goods and services would grind to a halt, leading to widespread shortages and a massive disruption of supply chains. Companies that rely heavily on Chinese imports would be among the hardest hit, with many facing bankruptcy or significant financial losses. But the economic consequences would be just the beginning. The humanitarian impact of such a war would be nothing short of apocalyptic. Millions of civilians would be caught in the crossfire, facing the risk of displacement, injury, or death. The already fragile infrastructure in many Pacific nations would be severely strained, leaving countless people without access to basic necessities like food, water, and shelter. The sheer scale of the humanitarian crisis would be overwhelming, with many aid agencies and relief organizations struggling to keep up with the demand for assistance. As we explore the long-term implications of a Pacific war, it's clear that the consequences would be far-reaching and profound. A new global order could emerge from the ashes of the old one, with the balance of power shifting dramatically in favor of China. The US would likely suffer significant losses, both economically and militarily, and its global influence would be severely diminished. The implications for global security would be profound, with many nations facing an uncertain and potentially volatile future. But it's not too late to prevent such a disaster. By understanding the complex factors that could lead to war, we can work towards a more peaceful and stable future for all nations. We must engage in constructive dialogue and diplomacy, addressing the underlying tensions and conflicts that drive nations to war. By working together, we can build a more secure and prosperous world, where nations can coexist in peace and harmony. The question is, will we take the necessary steps to prevent a global catastrophe, or will we sit idly by as the world teeters on the brink of disaster?